Welcome everyone, or welcome back from lunch. I don't know if you're as full as I am. The sandwiches were huge and delicious. So we have, as Brent said, a panel on customer experience and really how to kind of make it happen in your company. And so we've got Ashish with Manheim, who is, I'll have everyone introduce themselves, and Rob Hauser from Sage, who are doing customer experience in their organizations. And Esteban Kolsky is here with us to give the broad perspective on some best practices around what is actually happening in the broader market. So everyone just introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what customer experience means in your company, and then Esteban, the broader definition, if there is one, of customer experience. So Ashish, you want to start us off?
Sure. Ashish Bisaria, work for Manheim. Manheim is the world's largest used car auction house. So we take all used cars and bring the buyers and sellers together in a B2B environment. So our customer base is very well defined. And customer experience for us in our company is about driving 4 behaviors from our customer. And the behaviors are buy, use, stay, and recommend. So at the end of the day, those are the 4 things that drive all customer experience decisions for us.
That's great. Rob?
I like that summary. So Rob Hauser, I work for Sage, which does accounting and payroll software and services around the world. In the US, you know them through their acquisitions with the old names of products like Peachtree Accounting and Act, which was actually just sold last week. So customer experience, in my background, this sort of interesting change is I started in the user experience area, so usability, design, training, documentation, and have moved into the customer experience world as this thing we call Sage Advisor has sort of taken wings, and we're spreading it into all of our products to provide a more personalized customer experience by leveraging big data. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But for customer experience is we have changed our business model to being largely contracts. And so for us, that stay part is especially important because every year they have a new chance to go. And so we want to make sure that at that decision point, they are already very engaged with us and that we've engaged with them throughout the year and provided value to them and demonstrated that value through our Sage Advisor project. So a lot of while it includes those other areas, we really have a strong focus on the engagement part and keeping them in the family.
Great. So retention is a key area for both of you. Esteban, what do you see as the general definition, if there is one, in the market?
So the general definition, if you go back in 2004, when I was at Gartner, we wrote this humongous, by anybody's standards except for Gartner, document that was 60 pages long on how to do customer experience. And we did all the research on definitions and everything, and the one that we came up with that we felt more comfortable is that it's the aggregation of all senses as expressed by an interaction by a stakeholder, which means absolutely nothing, but it sounds really good. But essentially, I mean, there's a few points in there that do matter. I mean, first of all, experience, it could be what the customer experiences, what the employee experience, what a partner experiences, or what somebody else experiences. You got to take each stakeholder as a separate entity when you talk about the interaction, and then it has to do with what they feel when aggregate all the different senses. It's not only what they see and what they hear, or but it has to do with everything. So if you want to take it to like the 21st century and define it a little bit better, I mean, an experience is what happens to the customer. The customer experience is what happens to the customer from the moment they first hear about the company to the moment they don't want to hear about it anymore.
Right, that's a great point. So a lot of people will think about customer experience as customer service, and it's not it at all. Customer service is just one part of customer experience.
Right.
Customer experience may be marketing communications you receive, or the Tiffany blue box as you open it, or all the different ways that you interact and all those different touch points.
Yeah, if you really think about it, there's a few of the hotels in Vegas now, they have the custom scents that they were designed for the hotel, and you can sense them everywhere you go, in the hotel, in the elevator, in the casino, and everything. So I mean, that's part of the experience. It's about taking the entire, spectrum of interactions between the customer and the company and making them all seem the same, basically.
That end-to-end experience is a big part of sort of where we're transitioning now, because we've had lots of, I think, really good successes in individual areas across the company in improving customer experience, but they're not tied together and they're not consistent and they don't even sometimes seem like they're from the same company. And so that's our big revolution right now, is trying to take the Sage Advisor umbrella and use that to pull together that end-to-end experience.
And this is, I mean, you hear all these terms all the time interchangeably, right? Customer experience management, customer experience, voice of the customer. I mean, the main difference is the only one that actually refers to the end-to-end so far is customer experience. Customer experience management talks about the management on how to manage the experience for the customer, which is not really good to do. Voice of the customer talks only about the listening part, to listen to what the customer says, which is not a complete experience. I mean, when you talk about customer experience, you got to talk about the end-to-end of everything, every single interaction together.
Yeah, and that's, Ashish, what you were saying is you've got those 4 stages, really. So how does that actually work for the customer, or work for you interacting with the customers through those stages? And give us a little bit of depth about how it works.
Sure. So, you know, we are students of the same theories that Esteban is talking about. But if we break it down into practical day-to-day operation, or what is my role as a customer experience executive, it starts with 2 filters. You've got to view everything from a company's viewpoint and a customer's viewpoint. So if you take the filter of the company viewpoint, there's a theory of what the company wants to be, how they want to deliver their services, their brand, the experience. But then there's the reality. And a customer experience job is to take the theory, which is the design aspect, the reality, which is the execution aspect, and minimize the gap between design and execution. That is critical in driving experience. If you use the same concept from a customer viewpoint, customer has a theory of what doing business with us is. That's their expectation. But then there's a reality of our customers when they do business with us, and that's their perception. When their expectation is lower than perception, we've done all the right things. But when the perception, which is their reality, is lower than their expectation, that's the experience gap. So we look at those 4 boxes on everything we do to minimize execution gap and minimize perception gap.
Do you have an example of one thing that you've attacked and made improvements on?
Absolutely. As I said, we are in the used car business. One of the biggest things that drives used car is the information of the car. How accurately can you disclose everything about the car, because it's a used car by definition. There's a customer expectation of a scale 1 to 5. The reality is a 4.0 for me means very different a 4.0 for you. So we had to change the mindset away from numbers to say your expectation at the end of the day is to drive a car away that you know everything about it, so you've paid fair price. So we moved away from number system to what we call frame disclosure to tie the expectation and the perception closer.
Yeah, that's great. So, Rob, talk a little bit about how Sage Advisor works and how you're using that to retain your customers.
Okay, so what we're trying to do, I think, is, I like the way you said that about not managing the customer experience in a way. We're trying to create a more personal customer experience. We're trying to make sure that that customer knows that we know who they are and that the interactions we have with them add value to them. It's not just, sending out mass emails and general kinds of things on the blog and the website that don't provide them with value or sort of spotty value. I'm going to tell you a story to get to that. So I had 2 customer experience yesterday that were really interesting. So the first was, I called the GameStop where my son and I shop, and I said, hey, this is Rob Hauser, Wes's dad, you probably don't know. He's like, oh yeah, I know. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, well, I was gonna get this game for Wes, it's Far Cry, what do you think? Is that, and he knows what my criteria are, and he's like, yeah, it doesn't have the sex stuff in it, so you're probably okay. You're good with violence and language, it's not sex, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, he knows me, right? So he knows what I will allow and disallow. And so I said, well, I'll probably come out and get it later, but I don't know, maybe this weekend. So about 4 hours later, I walk into the store. He goes, hey, I've got your Far Cry. And he brings it up to the register, check out, talk for a minute, leave. And I'm like, I didn't even ask him to hold that for me. And he recognized me. And he knows how to give me advice that makes me able to make a better purchasing decision for my son. That's a personalized customer experience, right? Sort of end to end. And that's what we're trying to accomplish with Sage Advisor. We have lots of data about how the customers are using the product, how many employees they process payroll for, how often they process payroll, transactional kind of stuff that you talked about earlier, but also how long they spend on each screens, whether they use the slow way or the newer, faster way of doing things, whether they customize the application. We can see how many times they call support, what those issues were about in support, what other services they've bought, what industries they're in. So we start to take all that data and create a common place for our employees to be able to go, and when they're talking to that customer, whether it's sales or whether it's support or whether it's the user experience people trying to provide productivity tips and training suggestions to the customers to make sure that when they don't start from, hello, I'm Sage for the first time, but I know what you need, so let's start from here. We know you're a manufacturing company. We know you have 4 users who are sort of new to the system and they're not using it efficiently. Here's some training that can help them be more productive. So it's that personalized kind of experience that we're trying to strive for. So by leveraging the data that helps us to know who they are from the time we start to interact with them.
And it's interesting that both of them refer to basically the same thing, which is, you got 2 sides to the story. You have the company, you have the customer, right? And in the past, we used to say, oh, what you had to do is become a customer-centric company. And you've probably heard this many times. And the problem with customer centricity is like we put so much focus on the customer that we forgot about what the company gets to get out of it. And this is where we actually come in, around and getting a better, more balanced experience where like the company gets a win, the customer gets a win, they get a better interaction with the company, they get a more focused interaction with the customer, they both get to win in this situation, and the value is raised for both. And that's what it comes down to when it talks about customer experience. It's not about the customer experience, it's about the experience. And the experience is gonna, it's gonna improve for both. Improves for the customer, improves for the company, for the employee. I mean, I work quite a bit on customer service, and what we're getting a lot of like agent experience, the agent on the phone, and how the experience gets to be improved. How do we do better for them? How do we empower them? So the experience is not only about what the customer gets, even though we call it that way, but it's about how both entities get to have a win on that and how you get a win-win situation.
Right, there has to be a benefit for the company. You can't just do it because you want to be nice. That's great, but
that's
not
where
going to be long term if it's.
But that's what used to fuel most of the customer-centric projects. Was like, oh, we got to do what the customer says, and like you just rush and try to do everything without considering what's the benefit to the company. And that's where we're coming around and get a better balance.
So if I may add on this, one of the typical challenge for customer experience executives are, what should we focus on, or what is it the customer is asking us to change? And traditional customer experience surveys have focused especially on scales, 1 to 10, right, wrong, good, bad. And many metrics, CSAT, NPS, all aside, at the end of the day, there's one thing in the customer experience space that we are driving. The one thing that nobody has left is time. People, when presented choices of equal value, equal opportunity, typically end up choosing where they have to invest least personal effort. So we talk about customer effort, but then to bring what cliche word is voice of the customer into the boardroom, our customer experience surveys aren't about right, wrong, good, bad. We actually talk to them the 10 different times that the customer interacts with us, and we ask them, what do you want us to focus on improving for year 2013? If you have to pick one area that we could make better for you, what would that be? Once we have their priority, we do a second level of deep dive on that topic to say, what part of that business experience and interaction with you is broken or needs improvement, and that sets our 2013 priorities. So it's a very focused way of getting the voice of the customer into the boardroom and driving improvements.
That's a great approach. So both of you mentioned basically understanding the customer. So Esteban, can you talk a little bit about how getting the right information, how companies should go about getting that right information so they know what to do in terms of customer experience?
Well, I mean, the first step is to know what information you have and what information you need. Because and I'm not going to speak of anybody here. I know you're all the exception to everything that I say, but virtually everybody in the world has a really tough time dealing with what data is and what it means and what it represents. I mean, we think that we have customer data about the customer, and all we have is like a bunch of fields with like no meaning whatsoever. So unless you can take an understanding of what each piece of data is, where it comes from, how to use it, and what it's supposed to produce, and then how that reflects on the, on the bottom line for the business, how that reflects on the KPIs, you really don't have data. You have a lot of stuff stored in a database. So I mean, the way to get to the ideal set of information is like understanding first, what do you have, what do you need, and how are you going to use it. And then the next step is understand what your customers want you to do. If your customers want you to do things in a specific way, like Sage is doing, or like Manheim is doing, that's the data that you need to focus. It really doesn't make sense to retain an email address for a customer if you're never going to use it. I mean, it's great, you have it, and your marketing department loves to have it and send mailers about something that nobody will ever use. But it doesn't add anything to the experience itself. So focus on the specific processes and what data you need, you must have for that, and how you're going to use it. And then let the customer know how you're going to use it and what you're going to do with it. I mean, customers are not against you having the data. They're against you having to repeat the data a million times, and they're against you having the data for the wrong reasons. So.
Actually, what Esteban is saying, so exactly building on what he just said, when we ask a customer, what do you want us to focus on? And I speak for my business, a B2B market. The first thing they'll say is lower your fees. That's the biggest pain point for us. But there's a Starbucks model where I willingly pay $4.50 for a coffee that I can get for $1. So there is a stated need a customer has, but then there is a derived need based upon data. Yeah. So we look at what customers say and what they do based upon data. And the way we use big data, or the way we say it is, every interaction that the customer has, they leave data crumbs all over our system. And if we can collect those data crumbs about an individual, we know more about them than they know about themselves. So we look at stated need and derived need, and the top box, whatever falls in that, that becomes the voice of the customer. And
what's so interesting about what he just said? I know you probably heard this on TV, but people lie inherently. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. I put myself in there. We try to make ourselves better liked by the person we're talking to.
Correct.
So we express opinions based on what we think that they want to hear.
Correct.
So if I ask you what do you want to do, you're going to say lower fees because you think that that's what I want to hear. Mm-hmm. But it may not be the case. I mean, it may be that people that say lower fees, they pay without hesitation. Yeah. And maybe the people that don't say lower fees spend like 2 hours going all over the site, and then they go away and never come back. So the data actually tells the truth rather than what the people do. So if you really focus on the transaction that pertains to the data and the experience, then you can have a much better assumption of what things are than what people tell you. And by the way, that was Dr. House that said, in case you didn't know, that people lie.
So understanding customer behaviors is obviously of critical importance. And Rob, you were saying that that's one of the things that you look at, how people are using your software to really understand how to make that experience better. So clearly that's not as easy as it sounds. It takes a lot of work to get to that information. So what are some of the other obstacles that the two of you have faced in delivering a great customer experience or improving the customer experience that your customers are having? Rob, you want to start?
With the data? So,
or in general, just some of the obstacles that come along with customer experience.
Well, I'll pick up on the data part because I think that was the interesting thing about the keynote before lunch is that if you don't have actionable things you can do from the data, then it's just data. And we sort of were there for a long time. We had lots and lots of data that we were collecting about usage and interactions with the company and things like that. But it was sort of overwhelming. And it helped product management a lot to figure out, like, what do we want to invest in the product and what do we not want to invest in, because you could see exactly who was doing what. But it didn't really help the rest of the business. And one of the things that we finally realized is that, was what you were sort of getting at, is that we had to interpret that data. And so what's funny is, like, we had all these thousands of fields of data, but what's been most useful is like a simple dashboard that shows customer engagement by customer value. Highly engaged, high value, low engagement, low value, and where are they? And then we just wanted to see three things on that, right? So we want to see, and the main thing we wanted to see was, are people at risk? Are they moving from high value, high engaged, and something suddenly changed in their business? And that we want to see that when that's triggered so we can reach out and try to re-engage those customers. Or are they new customers and they're not moving up the engagement chain fast enough? And can we do something to intercede with them to sort of accelerate that move to being more engaged, because that will lead to being more valuable? Or are they a high value customer, but we haven't touched them in a long time? So they're high value, highly engaged, but we haven't touched in any way interacted with them for 9 months, because there's a point where they don't need to do things like call support anymore or ask for help. But if we don't provide any ongoing value to them, why would they need to renew their contract at the end of the year? So just that simple dashboard that takes, there's 100 different fields that we use to calculate engagement. And so you don't have to look at those 100 fields. Just look and see where are they on the engagement chart. And it's so much simpler for the business to act upon that and make sense out of it faster. And so that really can change the way you start a conversation or when you start that conversation.
So do you have specific actions put in place for each of those? So if an engaged customer hasn't been touched in a while, action X. If they're moving to being less engaged, action Y kind of thing?
Exactly. And and some of that's still being created, especially on the new customer side. That's newer for us. We've been focused more on the at-risk ones and the existing. But yeah, there's totally different strategies for all three of those groups on when we interact, how we interact, what level of service we provide, whether it's somebody calling you on the phone or is somebody sending you a message in the product, or are we just sending you an email message, and the different levels of interaction depending on the severity of the case and the value of the customer.
And so Ashish, earlier you had said that it was ineffective to use a scale, so you changed the question. And that was an obstacle that you had overcome. Anything else that you've dealt with?
Sure. I think our biggest obstacle is you can take every project in a company and justify a customer experience aspect of it. So 300 projects, each equally important. And if I may use the analogy, it's like on a football field, we were calling moving the ball to a first down as success, when the true success is with a touchdown. So we had multiple projects, each justifying a customer experience benefit. So using the stated and the derived need, we managed to get the 300 list down to a manageable 20, 25 projects. But getting the mindset change to say reducing the list and scoring a touchdown is far better than moving 300 balls to a first down. That is my biggest challenge every day.
See, you both are talking about the same thing in different terms, because you want to measure the touchdowns and you also want to measure the first downs.
Correct.
I mean, you want to be able to measure the little pieces individually and then put that into a bigger index, which is in this case a score that you get from a touchdown. You don't want to be so focused in one portion that you ignore the whole thing. You want to make sure that you have the end-to-end experience as the goal for what you're doing, but you want to measure every single thing. Every play, every yard that you get is got to mean something, and it's got to be measured. But then you don't want to focus on that measurement. You want to focus on the overall. You want to have this, customer engagement quadrants that you mentioned. That's what customer experience is about. It's about being able to monitor the whole thing at a big level, but still be able to go down into the little details and fix it when necessary.
My fantasy football scores are not looking good.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I'll say with Advisor, one of the aspects that we have is a rule-based messaging system. So we can push out messages to the customer and the product, and based on whether they meet certain criteria, show the message or not show the message. And that allows us to be very targeted in the personalization that we're providing. So even if we're providing a message to 30,000 customers, it's relevant to all those customers, and it's going to be helpful to them. So I have 3 levels of, the way I talk to the teams about this usually is there's 3 levels of evaluation for that. One is awareness. Did they see the message? And we can see how they interacted with it if they watched the video, or if they clicked on the link, or if they just closed it immediately. The second is, did it change their behavior? So if I said, hey, you keep skipping these same fields, and you could customize this invoice and save yourself time, did they go and do that within 2 weeks after receiving that message? That's a good example. So that's change in behavior, so we measure that too. But really, the third one is the only one I really care about, which is, did it impact the business in the way we wanted it to? So did it increase retention? Did it increase Net Promoter Score for those particular customers? Did they actually renew their contract that year? And so that's, again, just to what you're saying. We're measuring all 3. We care about all 3, but the third one is the really critical one. What's the impact of the business?
Thanks for a great panel. We could talk for much longer, but there's a lot coming this afternoon.
Thank you.